Okay, welcome back. Hope that you did okay on these 9 practice problems. Would like you to take a look with me as we go through them. Make some space. Okay, so for number 1, for the vertical asymptote, kind of almost easy to eyeball. If we were to take the denominator, x plus 5, and set it equal to 0, we would get x equals -5. For the horizontal asymptote, the degree is 1. The degree is 1. So this is case 2, where we take the leading coefficient. The leading coefficient here is 1. The leading coefficient here is 1. So the horizontal asymptote is 1. Okay. Letter B. Now, it looks as if almost there would be nothing that we could do here. But if I set that equal to 0, I could still factor it, or I could add 2 to both sides. And I could take the square root of both sides, and I'll get a plus or minus square root of 2. So what's happening in this case, you could have factored it like that as well. I know that looks awkward because it's a square root, but it does work. And in this case, you will have 2 vertical asymptotes. Now, as far as the horizontal asymptotes go, this is kind of a trick question because some of you might not have recognized this potential situation, that the numerator, even though it doesn't have an x term, the x term that is inherently there is an x to the 0 term, a constant term. So this is a situation where the degree of the numerator is less than the degree of the denominator. And if you recall, that's where the horizontal asymptote was 0. In C, the vertical asymptote is pretty obvious. If we take x minus 5 and set it equal to 0, we'll get x equal to positive 5. And if we look at the degree of the numerator compared to the degree of the numerator is greater than that of the denominator. So there is no horizontal asymptote. Letter D, the vertical asymptote, again, kind of obvious. X minus 1 equals 0 gives us x equals positive 1. And again, if you look at the degree of the numerator is bigger or greater than the degree of the denominator. So we have no horizontal asymptote. In E, we do have to do some factoring. I would take out a 2. And then I would factor the difference of perfect squares. What I would really do here actually is divide by 2. That way I would just have x squared minus 9 equals 0, because 0 divided by 2 is still 0. Then you would have x minus 3, x plus 3. So your vertical asymptotes, there are 2, are at 3 and -3. Now, how about your horizontal asymptote? Your degrees are the same. So we're going to pick off those leading coefficients. And there's your horizontal asymptote. For F, the vertical asymptote, once again, pretty straightforward. If we put in a 2, it's going to make that denominator 0. Degree of the numerator is 2. Degree of the denominator is 1. So there is no horizontal asymptote. last 3. Okay, so remember, vertical asymptote means we're setting the denominator equal to 0. If I add x to both sides, I'll have x equals 3. Don't let that trip you up. And then remember, this has an x to the 0 on it, even though it's a constant term. So that means it's less than the degree of the denominator, which means that our horizontal asymptote is the x-axis. Now, this one, in the denominator, we're going to factor that into a difference of perfect squares, kind of a factoring activity here. Now, only one of these is going to continue to factor, and that's this first one, the difference. And this last factor is not going to contribute toward a vertical asymptote. And the reason for that is because no matter what you put in for x, this particular factor, x squared plus 9, is going to be positive. It is not ever going to be negative. It is not ever going to be 0. So the only place that's going to give us a vertical asymptote would be setting x plus 3 equal to 0 and getting negative 3, and setting x minus 3 equal to 0 and getting positive 3. This one doesn't have any chance, if you will, of making the denominator 0. So kind of interesting there. Now, if we look at the degree of the numerator is less than the degree of the denominator. So that's case 1, where the horizontal asymptote is the x-axis. And then lastly, the only thing that could make the denominator 0, I mean, if we took x squared and set it equal to 0, and then we took the square root of both sides, I mean, usually we say plus or minus, but there's really no such thing as plus or minus 0. 0 is 0. So we only have one vertical asymptote. And then the degree of the numerator is greater than the degree of the denominator. So there is no horizontal asymptote. I hope that went well for you. Just a very good review of what's to come. We're going to see these asymptotes here very shortly. Wanted to make sure they were somewhat fresh in your head. Thanks for watching.